Timesheets in QuickBooks Online can help you track employees' time by job and track employees' time by class. It integrates right into the payroll feature of QuickBooks Online, and it can be used to calculate the employee's gross pay. This complete tutorial is going to explain everything you need to know about timesheets and everything you need to know about how it integrates to payroll in QuickBooks Online. Hello, folks. Mark Smolin here, ready to show everyone everywhere everything you could possibly need to know about using timesheets and timeslips in the payroll feature of QuickBooks Online. Now, you could watch only this video, which is a full course in using the timesheets and timeslips and single activity features in QuickBooks Online Payroll. However, you should know that this video is actually the last video in the full payroll playlist course that's right here on YouTube. And if you want to see the full payroll playlist course, just click down below this video in the description field, right above the table of contents, and you'll see the link, and you'll be able to learn everything else there is about payroll in QuickBooks Online. Now, you could just watch and learn everything you need to learn about this topic. But if you want to follow along step by step, I suggest you start this playlist from the beginning and follow everything I do and match what I do into your computer so that you can have the same numbers and have confidence while you learn. You don't have to. Many people just watch and learn what they need. And if that's not enough, you can contact me by leaving a comment in the comments section below this video. I get back to my students right away because I want your learning experience to be both easy and fun. I thank you very much, and without further delay, I now present the best possible tutorial you could watch about timesheets in QuickBooks Online.
Chapter 3, Time Slips and Single Activities.
A single time activity sheet in QuickBooks Online used to be called a time slip in the old days when people had to submit a handwritten hard copy of their time. It's the traditional way that employees would request their pay from their employer, and they would put all relevant information about the jobs that they did on the time slip and then sign it. Then the payroll person would base their hours from the information on the time slip. So what are the advantages of using a time activity slip instead of doing the payroll the way we've been doing it so far? Well, you can save the signed hard copy of the employee's time slip and file it as an attachment when you record it in QuickBooks Online, so you can see physically what the employee claimed and what they formally entered for the pay period. And then later, it will help us track time by class, track time by customer or job, and it will also help us bill clients for specific employees' time. And those are wonderful lectures that are coming very soon. And if you want to do those things in QuickBooks Online, you must use time slips or timesheets rather than doing it the way we've been doing it so far. So, a single time activity, you should know, when we fill out a slip in QuickBooks Online, it's not a transaction. Recording them without any additional step other than just recording the timesheet will not change any area of data like the trial balance or any balance owed to anyone anywhere. They have their own specific reports that we will open up and look at after filling out the single time activities. Now, what is the result of just recording the time, not paying the workers from the time, just recording the time slips? Any time activity made inside any pay period for any employee will override the default number of hours for that employee the next time you run payroll. Even if you only make one time activity with 1 hour for an employee, their default number of hours in the payroll for that week, whatever it is on the slip, will be there regardless of what you set for the default. So making one little time slip will override the default, and QuickBooks Online will take their hours from the slip rather than the default hours that you set. Of course, at the moment you run the payroll, you can override what's on the slip and put whatever hours you need to put for that period. But it's very convenient that QuickBooks Online knows if you made a slip, it'll override the default hours and base it only on the time from that time slip if that time slip is dated during the pay period. So let's do this. Let's first make Candy's default hours 40 hours a week and confirm that would be what would come up by default if we did not make Candy a time slip, and we will see that before we even make one time slip for Candy.
So we open Candy's employee information by clicking Payroll, Employees, go down to Candy, double click, and in the area of Base Pay, we will click Edit, and you will see we did not set any default working hours. So let's just put 8 hours a day, and we'll put 5 days a week, and then save. Now, if we go to pay Candy for that particular pay period, which we won't, we'll just take a look at what it looks like when we run the payroll. We can come up here and we can click Employee List, Run Payroll. We're doing the pay schedule that Candy is a part of. Okay, we'll remind ourselves later. Notice for the week in question, it automatically populated it with 40 hours. So that's how you set the default, but the default will be overridden when you make a timesheet or a time slip within the period.
So for our first example, let's imagine Candy worked 8 hours on a day that's close to the end of the week for Candy, close to the end of the next pay period that we would be paying Candy. Once we enter the time slip, then we will look at the relevant report.
So let's leave this by closing it out, don't save, and now we will enter our first time activity. We click the plus sign, we go over to single time activity. And we just put in the information. The worker is Candy, okay? The customer is optional for now. The service is optional for now, and we'll discuss later whether it's billable or what type of pay Candy's getting. We're going to make this part of her regular pay so that when this time slip goes over to the payroll, QuickBooks Online will know which category of pay these hours will be assigned to. Now, the date was October 23rd of 2025, and it was 8 hours. And you would put whatever notes and details you were supposed to put, like did great job, or any other information you would put. Of course, we could click Save and New, and that would save the time slip and give us the ability to add the new one, or Save and Close, even though we already saved it. Now let's check the results in the report. We click Reports, Standard Reports, go all the way down to the payroll report, and the very last report in the bottom right, Time Activities by Employee Detail. So we double click. Remember, we want all dates, and we can see this is the time by employee, and we only have Candy's time slip, But if we had a bunch, they'd all be listed here and they'd be grouped by employee. In fact, you can see what you did, just like any other entry, by double clicking on it in the report, and you'll be able to go back to the time slip and change anything you want and save it, and the results will change immediately. So let's save this to our bookmark reports because we cannot customize, there's no option. So we have to go to your browser, whichever one you're doing. Oh, excuse me, you bookmark it and you put, oh, look, it was kind enough this time to put the name, and we click save. And anytime we want to see it, we can go back to the bookmarks, click it, and it'll come right up. Notice, however, when it comes up, it doesn't save the customization, which is fine. But when you double click, you go back to the original time slip.
And now lastly, to prove the point, we will run the payroll for that week and see the default hours have changed. They're no longer 40 hours for Candy. They're the hours for any time activity during that period. We won't pay them. We'll just run the payroll and take a look. So now you see when you go back to the payroll for that same week where we made one time slip for 8 hours for Candy, you can see the hours that came up were 8 hours. And don't worry, you could always change it regardless.
Chapter 4, Using Weekly Timesheets.
In QuickBooks Online, a weekly timesheet is simply a data sheet that displays all the time activities of a particular employee during a particular calendar week. And you can enter all employee time data on the weekly timesheet instead of recording each time activity separately. In fact, if you enter anything on the single activity slips that we did in the last video, it will automatically show up on that particular worker's timesheet for that week. And the opposite is also true. If you instead to input their time on a weekly timesheet with the same data that we did in the last video, it will automatically show up on the individual time slips when you open the time-related reports. So how exactly does it work? Well, there exists a weekly timesheet for every employee that you add for each calendar week that ever was or will be. And there exists the timesheet for each worker for each week, whether you use them or not. They're just there. So how to find a specific timesheet? Well, when you open the timesheet window, which we will do in a moment, all you have to do is tell QuickBooks Online which employee and which calendar week, and you will see that particular calendar week's timesheet for that worker. And then you will suddenly see all of the individual time activities that were entered on the time slips, and it will be displayed on that timesheet for that worker for that week. So let's find the timesheet for the week of Candy's time slip, the time slip that we entered in the prior video. Let's take a look.
So we go to the plus sign and we just open the weekly timesheet window, even though we're not going to use it right now. Now we chose the correct employee, and notice the week that we want is the week in October of 2025. So we're using this week, the 19th to the 25th. We're using this week. And look what happens when we choose this week. On the 23rd, you can see this 8 hours was brought over from the time slip. And any time slip or single activity that's dated between these dates for this worker is automatically going to show up in this timesheet.
Now let's input some time directly in the timesheet instead of on the time slips. Let's imagine Saturday the 25th. Candy worked 3 regular hours and 2 overtime hours. We could put these 2 separate items on 2 separate time slips, but it would be more convenient to put them both on the same weekly timesheet.
Now let's add some hours in this timesheet and see that it's the exact same result as doing it in the time slip. So we go to Saturday the 25th and we put another 8 hours. And now she has a total of 16 hours just for this timesheet. And again, it is assumed it's regular pay and all the other information about it is right here. Pay type, if in fact we had to add more hours for the same day, we would come down here. So if we give her only 3 hours of regular pay, we can come down here and on the same day, we can give her 2 hours of overtime pay for the same day of the week. And of course, later when we track it by customer or class, you see that even though it's a weekly timesheet across the week, you can still make several entries on the same day as if you were doing individual time slips. And when you make those entries, it will be the same result as if you did individual time slips. So Candy worked on the 25th, 3 hours of regular pay and 2 hours of overtime pay on the same day. And if it were 2 different customers she worked for, we would put that here. If it were 2 different services she did, we would put that here. So every section of the timesheet is like a mini single time activity with all the information that you can put, but it's simply organized into a timesheet. When we click Save and Close, and go back to our favorite time report that we bookmarked, we can see that Candy now has 2 different time activities. If we choose the correct date range or we put all dates. Now, notice, even though this one was made on a time slip and these were made on the timesheet or recorded on the timesheet, they're all on the report the same way. And even though you recorded these 2 in a timesheet instead of a time slip, if you double click them from the report, you will go back to the specific single day time entry, not the time slip that you entered it on. If you want to go back to the original time slip, the only way is to go to the weekly timesheet in the transaction section and choose that particular worker for that particular week. And that's the only way to go back to the actual timesheet for that particular week.
Now there's one very important last thing that you should know about using weekly timesheets. The weekly timesheets by default are not always in line with the weekly pay periods. What you see on the left are the weeks listed for the timesheet. What you see on the right are the weeks listed for the pay period, and they list them in opposite order. If you're looking for a particular day's work, you will have to find it in which weekly timesheet, which is not always the same as every weekly pay period. And you would have to find the ones that are the closest with each other to find which pay period and which weekly timesheet has a particular time activity. However, there is a way to change the weekly timesheet's start day of the week, and that would make the weekly timesheet's listed weeks in line with the weekly pay periods if you feel you need to do that. Let's take a look.
So to change the setting of the timesheet so that you can match it to your pay week, you click the cogwheel and go to the general account and settings, not the payroll settings. And in the section of time, there should be a category of general that shows the default first day of the week. And if you click the pencil tool, you can choose whichever day of the week works for you to help better align it with your salaried and your waged workers in your pay schedule. And then we click Save, and then we click Done. And now when we go back to the timesheet window, you can see that it now goes from Wednesday to the following Tuesday instead of Sunday to Monday. And that's how you work with and control timesheets.
Chapter 5. Tracking time by jobs.
Tracking payroll costs by job helps you see where your payroll costs are really going. You must use timesheets or single activity time slips in order to track in this way. And you must first activate tracking costs by customer or job in the General Settings window, not the Payroll Settings window. Then you must have customers, jobs, or projects on the list to tell QuickBooks Online how to track them. Let's take a look at how to activate it.
From the top right, we click the cogwheel and we go over to Account and Settings. And the category of settings in this case is Expenses. And in this section here, we can see Track Expenses and Items by Customer is currently shut off. That's why it's gray. We click it and make it green to turn it on. Then we have to save this section here that's open. Just to scroll down and click Save. So that has saved these settings. You have to save it by going down like before. And we click Done.
Now, of course, you have to have customers on the customer list in order to track payroll cost by customer or job or project. So take a moment to just enter the names of these 3 customers. QuickBooks Online is so efficient that you could add all the other customer data later, but all you have to do to make sure there's customers on the list to track time with, at minimum, is just enter their name. So let's go ahead and do that now quickly so that we can record tracking time by customer.
We click All Apps, Customer Hub, Customers. Add customer manually, and I think you only have to put the name. And I think it will let us save it. Now it lets us go to all of the records with this first new customer, but it's best to go back to the customer list and see this is only one customer on the list. Click New Customer and do it again. And just click Save, and then that customer will be on the customer list. But we're not at the customer list. We have some more details it wants, but we can go back to the customer list. And now we have these 2. And then we have the other one is Hillary Pierce. Okay, so we go New Customer. Okay, Save. And now we're ready to track the timesheet and the time of the employees by the customer.
Now, before we actually record the time, let's go ahead and save the relevant report time by customer or time activities by customer detail, because that's where it will show up and show up sorted after the time activity is recorded.
So the relevant report is time activities by customer. We click Reports. Then we go to Standard Reports, and it's in the section of Sales and Customers. You go down to Time Activities by Customer Detail. Open it up. Of course, we want to see the result of all dates regardless. And we can see right now Candy is the only employee who has used timesheets or time slips. And in each of those timesheets or time slips, we did not specify any specific customer. Now we will. But before we do that, let us save and bookmark this. Or actually, if it gives us a chance to save as, we should take it instead of bookmarking it in our browser, because that would be very much better. And I don't like the word copy because it is the report. You can put whatever name you feel comfortable with, and we click Save. Now it's in the browser, so we can always go back to our bookmarks and check it out right after we record time activities by customer.
And now we're finally ready to record tracked time. Let's imagine on October 27, Candy worked 5 hours for Johnny Lawrence and 2 hours for Hillary Pierce. And let's further imagine Alan on the same day worked 6 hours, where 3 of them was for Johnny and 3 were for Hillary. Let's take a look at how to record both of these, and let's use time sheets rather than time slips.
We come here, create weekly time sheet. And if it's October 27th for Candy, then Candy is already selected. It remembers, and we want October 27. We go up to go back in time in this one, and we want October. We want this time period where October 27 falls on the weekly timesheet. Now here we are, and we already have some hours on this timesheet for, but we want to go over and enter this one for October 27th because that's included in the next pay period. And let's see what the breakdown is. 5 for Johnny Lawrence and 2 for Hillary Pierce. So we select, they worked 5. Actually, we have to come down here and correct what we did before. We actually put in something before, but we're going to change it to 5 hours down here. And we're going to change it to 5 hours for customer Johnny Lawrence. And the pay type will be regular pay instead of sick pay. So that's 5 hours for that one. But on the same day, you could put in for the very same day for Candy, you could put in 2 hours for Hillary. So on the same day, the 27th, come down 2 hours, and you're putting for Hillary 2 hours on this day. So now we have 5 and 2 for Johnny and Hillary in Candy's timesheet on this particular day. And we click Save and Close. Now let's enter for Alan. And we're going to put Alan worked 6 hours for Johnny and 3 hours for Hillary on the same day. So we make Alan's timesheet. Create weekly timesheet. This time it's employee Alan. We go up to go back in time to the week that we wanted that October 27th falls within, which is this. And on the 27th, again, Alan worked 6 hours for Johnny and 3 hours for Hillary. So we put 6 and we choose the customer Johnny, and we go down in the same column and we put 3 because the same column is the same day. And then that customer is Hillary. That's how we know it's the same day, but two different activities for two different customers, even though it's the same day. Save and close. Now, when we open our beloved report by clicking the bookmarks in our browser, actually, I think we were able to save those in the reports, and we go to the custom reports. Did they let us? Time activities by customer detail. We click it. Notice, aha, Candy's hours that were just for Hillary are isolated here. The Candy's hours, actually, it's by customer. So you see that Hillary has these, and here's the total for Hillary. Johnny has these, here's the total for Johnny. And down here are all Candy's uncategorized. But you see within Hillary, Hillary has a total of 5 of our work hours, where 2 of them are from Candy and 3 are from Alan. And you can see these are the individual ones, and you can double click and go right back to it and see the single time entry that one can edit.
Now we've tracked the number of hours per worker, per job, or customer. But what we haven't done is determine the actual payroll cost per customer. In order to completely do that, you have to actually pay the workers. In other words, timesheets themselves are not transactions. Recording them will not affect the profit and loss by customer the way we need it to. Only when the payroll you run uses those particular timesheets will then the cost for what you pay the workers change for the proportional amounts in the profit and loss by customer. So let's just take a moment to add the profit and loss by customer, and then we'll pay the workers and see what happens.
So now let's save the report that tracks the salary by customer or job. We click Reports, Standard Reports, and we go down to Business Overview, Profit and Loss by Customer. Click here, Year to Date, change the choice to All Dates, and we're lucky that this particular report at this moment allows us to click Save As, and I don't like the name Copy. We're saving it in the Customize section so it's easier to get to, and we click Save.
And now, finally, we'll pay Alan and Candy and see what happens.
So now to pay them for the grand fail finale, we will click +, Payroll. This is the schedule. Remind me later about the taxes. And for Alan, for this time period, of course, because this is a class at school, let's just click Create another check so that we can pay him as well. And notice this has 9, and it says these hours were automatically added. And we pay them on March, I guess we're up to 18. Anyway, if we click Preview Payroll, if we drill down, we won't really know which timesheet or time slip the hours came from. But anyway, all the previous stuff we learned is still here. So we click Submit Payroll, and we definitely paid them for those days for those customers. So that means if we go back and we click Reports, Custom Reports, and we click Profit and Loss by Customer, you will see that now that they are paid, you will actually finally see that it splits it by customer there. And the interesting thing is, if you zoom in a bit in your browser, you will see that it even proportionalizes the payroll related taxes of those workers for those days and the wages.
Chapter 6, Billing Clients for Employees' Time.
Once an employee's time is tracked to a particular client or customer, you can then bill that client, which means send them an invoice to pay for that particular worker's time and the service that they gave you. It just involves clicking the box for billable right there in either the time slip or that section of the timesheet. But before you can do that, you would have to activate this particular feature in the settings window, just like you activated tracking expenses by time. So let's go ahead and activate the billable feature now.
So we activate the billables feature in the same place. We click the cog wheel and we go over to account and settings and we go right back to the expenses tab. And in the very same section, we have to make these expenses billable. So we click anywhere in this area. And to make sure this one is activated, we click this. And then once it's green and it's shifted to the right, we can click done. And by the way, there are more details about this, like tracking it as income or decreasing the expense and putting it in different income accounts if you track it as income. But that's a topic for another time. Right now, we're just learning how to make it billable, and you can take other courses that give more detail about billable expenses in general. So we scroll all the way down to save this particular setting. At least that's the way it looks for now. And then we click Done.
And now that we're able to record employees' time as billable, you should know that as soon as you save the timesheet or time slip, those hours will show up on the unbilled time report. Let's go ahead and set that up now.
So we click Reports, Standard Reports for now. Go down to the section of Who owes you, and there's something right here, Unbilled Time. And we double click. And right now there's none because we have not yet marked anything as billable. But what we can do, if we don't see the option to save as, which in this case we do, we could bookmark it, but we do see this. So unbilled time will be in the custom section. So we can go right back to it and it will save the customization.
Now let's go ahead and record some billable time. Let's imagine on Saturday, November 1st, Candy worked 5 hours for Hillary Pierce. We bill her out at the rate of $200 an hour for Candy's services. And because we didn't set up services ourselves like we would in the other QuickBooks Online courses, QuickBooks Online comes with a default service called Hours. And that's an item on the products and service lists that's connected to an income account called Services. And that was set up by default. So you could use the ones that you set up, but in this example, we'll use the one that QuickBooks Online set up by default. Let's take a look at how to record it.
Create weekly timesheet, even though we could put this on a single activity. And we're going for this particular worker for this particular work week or timesheet week. So 11/1 falls in this week. Okay. Saturday the 1st. How many hours did we say? 5 hours. Specifically for this customer, Hillary, 5 hours. The service was hours. Okay, and we learned in our basic QuickBooks Online, any service listed here in the service list is connected to income accounts, And in this case, the income accounts is hours. Pay type, it'll be part of Candy's or this particular worker's regular pay, not her overtime or her sick pay. And now the interesting thing is we want to make this billable. Billable at the rate of $200 an hour. And again, this money, 5 times 200, when this finally hits the accounts, will be recorded as hours that get tracked to whichever income account is connected to this service. And we click Save and Close. And now let's check our favorite report. Report, Custom Report, and Unbilled Time. And we can see we marked the time as billable. And we can see this time activity that we entered on a timesheet. If we double click, we go back to the time slip, the way it looked, because that was just the piece of the timesheet, but it's still there and it's billable at this rate, and it will stay on this report until we actually bill this client for this time.
Now, as you might recall, timesheets and time slips themselves alone are not transactions, which means only income from what's actually billed on an invoice will show up and affect the accounts. So, now let's make an invoice to bill Hillary for Candy's hours.
So we click Create Invoice. Now, of course, a lot of stuff pops up instead. So we close this and we close this and we want just the invoice. And the most important thing to notice is at the moment we add this customer to the invoice, we notice that a right panel opens up with all of the unbilled time that relates to that particular customer. And there would be several boxes popping up if there were several different time activities that were marked as billable with different employees recording their time. And if we wanted to record one of them, we would click Add. Now notice we can now close out the right panel and see that 5 hours that was on that one-time activity that we added was added to the invoice for this particular service and for this rate that we had set up a moment ago. And now when we click Save, you can see the trial balance will reflect that we earned income from the hours. And of course, we could click Save and Close, which means we could go right back to our reports, custom, trial balance, and we can see we now have income from hours services. It's right here, services $1,000. But the most important report that's saved in the custom report is the unbilled time. And notice that time activity is no longer on the unbilled time because we put it on an invoice, recorded the invoice, and when the invoice was recorded, it recorded the income.
So for the payroll expenses to show up in the lower half of the profit and loss by customer, you actually have to pay for those hours that are on that timesheet. Then the expenses will be matched to the income on the invoice you made for the customer. Let's take a look.
So now we want to run payroll, and this is the pay schedule that Candy is a part of. So we click confirm, remind me later. Now, this is the time period. Aha, look at that. This is the time period that we made the one-time activity for that was billable, and that's what shows up by default during this pay period. And we're going to pay her, I think we're up to March 20th or close enough to March 20th. But the point is, After we preview and after we submit payroll, we're going to reopen the profit and loss by customer, and you will see reports, custom, profit and loss by customer. And now Hillary's numbers have increased, and they've increased by what we just paid for the time that was tracked to Hillary on that recent time activity.
Chapter 7, Tracking Time by Class.
Class tracking for income and expenses helps companies make management decisions. Tracking the expense of payroll is an important part of that management tool, especially if payroll is one of your larger expenses. So we need to compare how much salary and wage expense are being devoted to a specific class of our operations. Now, in our example, we are imagining that our company has three areas that we need to determine the profit and loss for: marketing, tech support, and distribution. Our example employees could at any moment be asked to perform a service under any of these three classes. So we need to know the number of hours each employee worked for each class. So what do we need to do to set this up? Well, the first thing we need to do is to activate the class tracking in the general settings window, not the payroll settings window. Let's do that together.
We click the cog wheel and we go to Account and Settings. In the Advanced category of the settings, we go down to the section of Categories, which allows us to enable the class tracking. And we click Edit, Track Classes. We're going to click it so that it's green. And we could add some more details, but we will leave the defaults for now and just activate it. And to save this activation, we click First Save in the little section here. Now, and once it's saved as on, we then come down and click Done.
And now, of course, we have to tell QuickBooks Online the names of the different classes so it can track the income and expense for us. So we will put on the class list these three classes: marketing, tech support, and distribution. Then, after we put them on the list, they will be available to choose whenever we need to record something based on class. Let's take a look at how to put them in.
So to add the three classes, we click the cog wheel and we go over to All Lists and come down to Classes. Now, right now, there are no classes on the list. And we can go back to All Lists if we need to, and it goes from the cogwheel. So the class list has been added to the list of lists once you activated class tracking. Now in this window, we click New, and the name of this class is and we click Save. And we see it has been added to the list. We click New, Save. And now we have another class on the class list. New, and now we have all three classes on the class list, and we're ready to make timesheets and time slips by class.
And now let's see what it's like to record time by class. First, we'll record November 5th or the equivalent week and date for whatever quarter you're using. Dave Diakil worked 5 hours in the marketing class and on the same day worked 3 hours in tech support. Let's go ahead and record this in that weekly timesheet.
So November 3rd, Dave Diakil worked 5 hours in the marketing class. So we create a weekly timesheet because you could use a single activity, but we really should practice our weekly timesheets for Dave Diakil, and that was November 5th. So we want the timesheet for that range going backwards up. November 5th is right here. And he worked 5 hours in the marketing. So we will not assign him a particular customer, and we could assign both a customer and a class, but in this case, marketing is the class, and we don't have to even put a service or make it billable. We do have to tell QuickBooks Online if this is part of his normal salary or overtime pay. Okay, so we're going to make it, oh, well, no, excuse me, we'll make it part of his salary. 3 hours, but we have to go down because this is one-time activity. So to come down in the same column because it's the same day. He worked 3 hours in the, in the class of tech support on the same day, but in a different class. So therefore, it's a separate time activity. And then we click Save and New. Oh, excuse me, I don't know why it's spillable. I accidentally clicked this. Okay. And then we click Save and New.
And in the same pay period, on November 10, Alan worked 8 hours in the distribution class.
It's November 10, so that's the same timesheet period. Same timesheet period, but this one is for Alan, and he worked 8 hours in distribution. So we put the distribution class. And of course, when we're done, we can click Save and Close.
Having only recorded the time activities by class, the only report that this will show up on are time-related reports, but there's no specific time by class report. You must filter the time by employees detail report for each class in order to see the time by class. So let's take a look at how to do this.
So when we come to the report, we see all time activities, not the ones in a specific class. But what we can do is click Customize, and then we can filter, and then the filter we're going by is at the bottom of the filter list, class. And we want the class to equal a specific class. In this case, we want to see only the hours in the distribution class. And when we click the check mark, for it to filter, we click anywhere away from that area, and it'll reload. Remember, Alan only had hours in distribution, and it was 8 hours. And you can see all the other details of that time activity, and you can double click and open it up. But if we want to see a different class, we click Customize. And we don't want the distribution class. We want to see all the hours worked in the other class. Remove distribution marketing. So we want to see only hours in the marketing class. Move the mouse away, click anywhere away from that setting. Only Dave Diakil had 5 hours in the marketing class. Try the last one, customize. What about only the hours in the tech support class? If it'll let us do it, it's a little weird. Tech support, click away and come back. Remember, Dave also had 3 hours in tech support. So that's a way of getting the hours by class, even if you did not actually pay yet for those hours.
Of course, we all remember by now that only recording the time by class is not yet a transaction. But we needed to increase the related payroll expenses in the classes that were designated on the timesheets, but it will only happen when the employees are actually paid. So let's set up the report, profit and loss by class, and see that it has not yet affected this report.
And when we scroll down to the business overview section, we get this report, profit and loss by class. We double click to open it up. And remember, we like to make the date range all dates regardless. And now you see it's not separated by class because we have not added classes and paid any payroll with classes. But luckily it does let us save it. And I like to take out the word copy, but you can add any name you like and click save.
And now we'll finally pay the workers and see its effect on the profit and loss by class.
So now we run the payroll for Dave and we're paying Dave and he's part of the twice a month schedule. Remind me later. Now, when we look at the time period for which Dave was paid, we click create another check. Okay, we'll cut it into here. The time period that Dave, notice QuickBooks Online will show the entire salary, even though that during this time range, there's only one particular time slip for one class within here and one particular time slip with another. Don't worry. As long as the time slips were within this time range and he's getting paid the whole salary, just the numbers on the time slip will be tracked as expenses by class. So we click, oh, we got to make the date, the proper date, the way we do it in this class, move it over to the 23rd. And we remember, don't forget, we're doing creating another check for Dave, but don't worry, even though we're paying him the whole salary, the hours on the time slip that was submitted during this pay period will track those specific hours by class. So we click preview payroll and then submit payroll. Now let's check the report. We go to reports, custom reports, profit and loss by class. And you can see that even though it showed the entire salary for Dave, and we paid Dave for the entire salary, his hours that were on the time slip, specifically for the distribution class, are right here. So therefore, you don't have to worry. As long as you're running the payroll for a time period where they filled out the time slips, even though he got paid for the whole salary, the amount on the time slips for that payroll period will be apportioned to that class. So let's pay Alan for that time period and see if it shows up on the profit and loss by class. We're going to run the payroll. It's Alan's schedule. We click continue. Remind me later that we're in a class at school. Now, this is the pay date. This is the pay period where Alan worked inside this pay period, and we used that time for a specific class. And notice, since we put it on a timesheet during this period, 8 hours is what was put on the time activity, and that's why it shows up here for Alan, just like we learned before. Let's make the pay date the 23rd. We move it along, and we're going to excuse me. We're going to create another check. Sorry, because he was paid for that pay period in a prior example. So notice for that pay period, it remembers it has timesheet hours. But the most important thing when we click Preview Payroll, Submit Payroll, now we take a look at the profit and loss by class report, custom report, profit and loss by class, and notice just only the class that Alan worked for his wages and his taxes on that time slip for that period shows up here as wage expense for that particular class and taxes for that particular class.